The Todd Glass Show is on the Nerdist Podcast Network. Find him also on iTunes. His new pilot, Camping with Todd, has Zach Galifianakis, John Doerr, Eddie Pepitone, and Todd go camping. He has a special on Netflix, another special, which may also find its way to Netflix. ToddGlass.com for dates. High Plains Comedy Festival, Denver, Colorado, August 24, 25, and 26. Helium Comedy Club in Portland, September 28, 29, and 30. Vermont Comedy Club, Burlington, Vermont, October 19, 20, and 21. Doc's Lab, San Francisco, October 27 and 28. And Helium towards the end of the year. ToddGlass.com.
This is TMI with your host, Dave Archer.
Hello, Mr. Archer.
Yeah.
How are you?
Today on TMI, we have my favorite comedian, Todd Glass. He has my favorite podcast, The Todd Glass Show, on Nerdist Comedy Network. I spoke to him today while he was working out at the gym, while he was also on his cell phone and long distance. So, you would just ask you to be merciful on your criticism of the audio. Imagine talking to your favorite comedian. Here's Todd Glass. I always thought it was true George Carlin. It's to, because you don't say, I swear to George Carlin. Now, to could be a little ambiguous, because it'd be like, it's too much George Carlin. Like, it's to George Carlin. I think it should be true George Carlin.
Well, people say, I swear to God.
Yeah.
So I said,
I get it.
Swear, yeah.
But you could say true George Carlin.
Well, you could, but I don't want it. Why would we say true George Carlin?
Well, I don't know. It's not how I heard it, really.
Yeah. Well, no, but I thought you were trying to sell us on it.
Yeah, well,
right?
You caught me.
Yeah, don't try any tricks, David. But yeah, because I think it just started because, I swear to God, swear to George. Yes, so then I swear to George Carlin. You swear to, yes, you swear, yes.
How much of his act did you, were you able to catch? Were you able to see any of them live?
When he was alive?
Yeah.
Of course. No, when he's dead, Todd. How many,
I mean, there's all the specials, but did you actually go and see him?
No, I never saw him live. And I had an opportunity at the Comedy and Magic Club, and I didn't. But, of course, I saw a lot of his... and by the way, early on, I'll say now... Well, you'll probably say in the beginning or whenever you say it, but if they hear background noise, it's because I'm on the elliptical at the gym. But for the first... I'm on here for about an hour and a half. And for the first half hour, I go pretty slow. So it's actually a good time for me to talk, as long as there's not too many people around. But I always try to get here a little early if I'm going to do something like this, because I make sure there's one treadmill where there's nothing next to it, elliptical. So, because I'm not going to be one of those people that, talks really loud on the phone while there's people next to me. So there's one treadmill. It's like all by itself. So I snagged that one today, and on it I am. So get that out of the way.
It's like a mouse on a mouse wheel.
Yes. So, yeah, I saw a lot of these recorded, obviously just a lot of him on,
Well,
YouTube.
I actually did see him. He played Toronto at the O'Keefe Center, which doesn't exist in Toronto anymore. I guess it was, I'm thinking 89, I don't know. But and I was aware of George Carlin just as a kid. I think somebody gave me a tape to listen to of music on one side, very tame, lame, one side. I don't know if they realized it, but on the other side was what sounded like a bootleg recording of one of his sets, and it was filthy dirty, like full of all kinds of words you don't want an 11-year-old to be listening to over and over and telling all his friends and trading the tape around. So I did get to see him. I haven't seen as many of his specials as I probably should have. I wonder if, even though he's a great, his style doesn't seem to work as much right now with the plays on words.
Well, that was only one. That was him as he grew. Even he, I learned in going to see Kelly Carlin's show, one-woman show. He grew past that, and that was sort of like look, I'm giving my version of this, but I don't think it's that he was upset with the impersonation of him, like, oh, they shouldn't do it. No, he gets comedy that, that's a parody of him, and I don't think that's what upset him, but he didn't like what maybe he wanted to grow. Right. And, he moved past that. So that style of that, even he, evolved past that.
Can you help me understand Gilbert Gottfried? And so he's parodying comedians. Is it comedians of a certain period?
Well, I haven't seen Gilbert in a long time, but I can tell you this, that when I saw Gilbert when I was probably 18 years old in Philadelphia at the Comedy Works with my friends,
right,
we loved it. And we got the absurdity of it. I just remember there was some, how like sometimes you're telling a story, I think this actually might explain what we thought was funny.
Yeah.
One element of Gilbert. Now again, I haven't seen him in a while. Not that I'm prefacing that just 'cause I don't know, maybe something changed, so I'm just pointing that out. But listening to him on Stern, always loved it. But you know how sometimes you're telling a story and you go, blah, 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 and passing it's just maybe how old you were. And you're like, I guess I was about 16. Oh, you know what? I was probably 17. But anyway, hold on. We were at the mall. I might have been 19. But anyway, so me, my friend, you know what? I'm thinking now we were 15. What's wrong with me? We were 15 years old. And then me and my friends were, we're 12. We were 12. That's right, we were 12 because, well, see what I just did? He would do that for another 10 minutes. So he's telling a joke, and then was it, you know what? I think I was 7. Now he never did that. I don't know why I came up with that as an example, but it's the absurdity. He was doing a bit about getting a turtle from under a radiator, and I stuck and I prodded, and he just kept going on and on and on.
Right.
And I think you have to know, look, I was 18 at the time. I think we subconsciously knew, not that we thought about it. He knows he's absurd.
Yeah.
So it's like when somebody can say they don't like something, but like it's almost like when people go to see Neil Hamburger, the people that don't like it and heckle, I'm like, you have to know you cannot like it, of course. But to heckle a character, now I'm not saying Gilbert's as much as a character, but like some people just don't get it at a level of like, I'm not saying you have to like it. To get it means you could get it and not like it. But I think if you got, digressing here for a second over to Neil Hamburger, if you got it, but you didn't like it, I don't think you'd be the person heckling. If you hated it and didn't get it, I think you might be the person heckling. So to a level of getting it, I think with Gilbert, we got it. And we went Friday night. He did very poorly. We were hysterical. We went back Saturday night because we liked it so much, and he annihilated.
Yeah.
So, but I digress. But on to what made
and that was because it was the crowd wasn't ready the night before. I think I heard this story. It was he did the same set both of those nights, but the second night,
pretty much,
it was just the crowd was ready to accept him. Do you listen to his podcast?
I don't, but hold on real quick. So what I always say the collective audience. I'm sure there were people the night he wasn't doing well like us that loved him, but the collective audience didn't. But now just real quick. So what made you ask me about Gilbert Gottfried?
Well, I'm trying to just look at comedy, and and if it's being parodied, you are defining it. You're defining something to parody. And so it's maybe it's a comedian's look at comedy itself.
I don't know if it's about a parodying, maybe absurdity, maybe parodying absurdity, which I always find very funny. I guess, I don't know if you could say there was something within like Kevin Meaney, comedians like that I like, or Gilbert, the absurdity and just taking it to the nth degree.
So they're over the top.
Yeah, I guess it might be hard for me to explain, but you do have to know what they're parodying.
Right.
Sometimes that is, but we didn't know back then. He wasn't really, I don't know if that's the right word for Gilbert, but no, I do not listen to his podcast. But I am a fan of Gilbert.
Sample it just for a minute. It's unbelievable. He is himself, and he co-hosts it with a researcher, straight man. And between the two of them, it's just a wonderful look, and mostly at late 60s through the 70s culture. So I guess it's not going to work with millennials as much, but he's just doing his thing, and it's great.
Yeah, I got to give a listen to that because I do
really
like
good.
Gilbert. I get a little nervous around him when I meet him because
He would be scary.
Well, he's a little socially awkward, and I'm a huge fan and have been for a while. So I get a little bit locked up a little bit when I just saw him in Montreal, and he could have been sweeter.
Yeah.
He was so nice and so kind, but just a little socially awkward.
I don't know if it was a bit I heard once where I think we were supposed to be hearing him actually be an actual human being, like talking to somebody on the phone in a business call, and he actually was a normal person, not quote Gilbert.
Not
but
Gilbert,
I have a feeling that was just a bit, and that he is Gilbert 24/7.
I think you're right, and that's my guess too. I think that was the bit. But hey, Gilbert Godfrey, he's been around a long time.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
The other comedians that went through that club in Philly that you guys went and watched, it's a list of people who would later become quite well known. You rattle off a few of those just off the top of your head.
Yeah, and I remember one that I don't know what they're doing now too either. So a lot of people left an imprint on me and my friends. Some comedians that we might have seen twice when we were in high school, and we still quote them. So
wow.
That's also important to point out. I list the other ones because obviously people know who they are. But I didn't even know what a comedy club was back then. I thought, well, who are we going to see? Are these like college kids telling jokes? But we saw, Jerry Seinfeld, Jay Leno. Now those two were already, it shows how long they've been pretty big. Even back then in 83 or 84, they were household names. They were, it was a special event at comedy, but let's put it that way. Even back then it was like, oh, they're coming. That's cool. That's a big deal. We knew who they were. But Jerry Seinfeld, Jay Leno, you saw Gilbert Godfrey, Stephen Wright, Roseanne Barr, Eddie Murphy, Richard Lewis, Rich Hall, Bill Maher, Tim Allen. We saw a lot of comedy, and I just couldn't get enough of
it. Right. And later you would wind up opening for Jay Leno?
Yeah, well, they would always say when we just went to see regular shows, they would say like, before maybe they brought up the headliner, hey, if you think you're funny, try your hand at comedy Wednesday night. And that was the open mic night. And eventually I did go. And then sort of the thing was they would take comedians when they were ready from open mic night and let them host. At that comedy club, they brought in the professional comedians, like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, something like that. So you would get to host a show on the weekend in front of a packed house. So basically, for people that don't know hosts, sometimes people go, oh, you're funny. You should do stand-up. You're the host. Well, the host is just doing his stand-up, off the top, doing like 8 minutes up front and then introducing the acts. So that was like a big deal. So yeah, my first host weekend was with Jay Leno, which was, 350 people, 6 shows. It's pretty crazy.
That was the first real big boost for you. it must have been a pivotal thing, or were you already in over your head already by then?
There's not that much foreshadowing when you're going through it. It's not like you go, this is it, I'm gonna, but it was the first time, the audiences, you're so nervous.
Right.
The advantage of doing it, though, is that you've never had an audience. At least I had never had an audience. You didn't have to prove you were funny. You just had to prove you weren't not funny. Like, they were ready to laugh.
Right.
And I went up and did very well very quickly because they were, paying good money, and wasn't an open mic night where you had to prove yourself. The comedy club had already proven itself for people that went week after week after week and saw great comedy. So it was just like this. It felt good. It was a little, okay, I'm doing something, but not like, oh my God, I'm going to do this the rest of my life now and make a living,
What can you tell us about crashing? I assume that some of it isn't something you can talk about, but I understand you're doing an episode or two of crashing.
Yeah, I know very little, except I just did a part in an episode that I went to New York to shoot. That was just like 2 weeks ago. As far as tell you, like what?
Well, wait, what's your part in it, or how's it been, or what's Pete Holmes really like? And did you know that crowd back then? Yeah, I did. I knew the crowd. Well, it's funny. I didn't know what episode I was doing until I got there, or what it was about. Not by any reason, just because I just didn't realize that what it was about. But it was about something that I think is very interesting. It was about when shows, people call it alternative comedy, and and even I do lazily sometimes. But really, it was just, to me, the way it coined its phrase, because people that are negative about it would be alternative to what? Laughs. And I don't think that's the case at all. I think, well, is there three types, basically, of comedy? There's comedy, the standard joke and punchline, where, it can be about your mother-in-law and everybody knows you're not married. Then there's the alternative, which is, true in the moment, can be storytelling. And then there's improv, which I think is a third branch, isn't it?
Well, I think it's harder to explain than that. Huh. I think what, to me, I'm given a chance to here's how I perceive it.
Yeah.
It was not that there weren't great comedians that maybe didn't work what they called the alternative scene. But before I say that, let me explain what I think it was and how it all got started. And you don't know a scene unless you submerge yourself in it.
Right.
With music or comedy. And what I see happen a lot, and this is why people have a perception of what it is.
Yeah.
If you stick your nose into some new scene negatively, like, picture your nose scrunched up and you go, I'm going to go see what happens down there. And you walk in and you sit in the back of the room and your nose is twisted up a little. Maybe you're older. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're not. Maybe you're the same age as everybody else. But you don't see that scene a lot. And you go once, maybe you go twice or three times. No, that's not how you know what a scene is. Because there were comedians in those scenes that maybe weren't your cup of tea, maybe took advantage of these wonderful audiences and weren't really doing comedy. So that's what I think happened a lot. But I think what happened is, look, I'm by what I'm saying, I'm, saying that there was a lot of great comedy at comedy clubs. Then why did they have to have an alternative scene? I think what happened was they were building so many comedy clubs and the crowds were great. But then, there were too many comedy clubs. The ones that were good, a lot of them are still open. When people go, when comedy fell apart. But, it didn't fall apart. A place like Chicago had 10 big comedy clubs, or 7. And, maybe there was too many. There are not enough good comedians to fulfill it. So a lot of people, like my friend says, I'll tell you the reason they didn't stop going out to clubs. They didn't stop going out because they were having a ball. So these clubs are now holding 300 people and people aren't coming out anymore. So they start giving away free tickets because they figure, and there's nothing wrong with creative marketing, but they were giving away like a lot of tickets. Everybody in the audience knew, so the crowds were not good.
And what year is this point that you're describing?
I think it started in like 94 when some of these clubs were having trouble filling the seats. But
so that's when the comedy industry contracted. So is that when, the alternative comedy scene sort of started before then, didn't it? Or am I wrong?
There's a gray area, I think, around that area. But I think what happened was there were a lot of comedians that were good comedians but couldn't play well to this 300 people that got free tickets. So I thought it was, in my memory, not alternative comedy per se, but alternative venues. Like venues where they didn't have the pressure of someone that was just trying to serve food and drinks. Because you can work a comedy club that serves food and drinks, but comedy is the priority. A lot of comedy clubs, wonderful, great comedy clubs, serve food and drinks. They serve them right. They do it right. They know how to serve drinks. The show is the main focal point. But this wasn't the case. So they started having comedy, at least when I was in L.A., like at a place that was just a back hole at a restaurant that didn't even have a PA. And guys like, Odenkirk and Dave Rath, who was a manager, would lug in a PA system, and we would do these shows. And the audiences were great. And to me, what happened is when comedy and sketch mixed, like there'd be a stand-up show, but there'd also be maybe a theme, or maybe someone that wasn't a stand-up would do a 5-minute piece that was. And it's when people like, Jack, Tenacious D, and back then even like, of course, I'm David Cross and Odenkirk, and I'm going to forget so many names, Kathy Griffin, who was, actually really very, very funny then. And everybody was going up and doing different things. So to me, it wasn't about if there was some of it that was like, oh, that's just pushing. That's not, my opinion even on some of it was like, nah, these crowds are beautiful and you're just not even doing anything. To me, it's about what it did do. And it did a lot. It gave a platform to do really great comedy and different things and that you couldn't do in front of those other audiences.
Right. The size of the venue, the type of venue.
Exactly. So it was a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I'm glad I was a part of it. And to me, that's what alternative comedy was, like just this different thing. And the audiences were patient. First of all, the other audiences weren't not patient because they were dumb. Maybe they weren't trained to be patient. But these audiences were patient, and I grew a lot. And, it was a vehicle for a lot of comedians to really, develop. And that's what that crashing episode I did was about. And it's still going on, maybe for different reasons. But, it used to be like if in LA or New York, there was like 3 big comedy clubs. Now comedy is diverse all over, spread out. There's like cool living room shows. And there's shows in people's backyards that are great. And these, the Meltdown or UCB.
I missed that show, The Meltdown. That was a good one.
Yes, and these crowds sat there. They treated comedy like it was the opera.
Right.
And they had people all over the gamut. There were people that were 18, 21-year-old new comedians, and they also utilized guys that were 40 and 50. And it was silly, it was deep, it was all over the place. And it's wonderful, and it still is. Comedy is still wonderful. It's like, if I'm right, comedy's, hopefully it'll be better next year. Hopefully it gets better and better and better.
Your show, in some ways, creates sort of a safe space for, trying bits and improv. I'm wondering if keeping politics and some of these issues that people are agonizing about out of it is part of creating a safe space for silliness.
On my podcast?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I hope so. That's what.
Is that the strategy? Because some people are kind of critical of comedians who keep away from issues, politics, Trump.
Who?
Eddie Pepitone, in one of his recent podcasts, was criticizing comedians for steering clear of serious subject matter.
Well, I do both, but I would defend anybody that does whatever they want.
What I'm asking, absolutely. But what I'm trying to see is if you do this on purpose, that maybe a lot of what you could do wouldn't work if it was all tainted full of cynical reflection about how things aren't getting any better. And
well, also, hold on, and by the way, don't think because I'm maybe amending something you're saying that I'm, being argumentative or anything.
No,
but,
be argumentative.
Eddie, most of the time, if someone Eddie, like if I heard his version of what you heard,
Right.
I'd probably go, oh yeah, I agree with that, because I don't think Eddie's. I'd have to hear what he said, but I happen to do, on my show, it's mostly silly, but, I talk about social issues, politics once in a while, just do whatever you want. I don't think, I find it, because Eddie can be silly and also cynical. I don't think it's cynical unless they're wrong or picking on the wrong group, because Eddie is, I think there's a reason that Eddie connects with you. And it's because, if anything, when you're older or getting older, and he talks about things that kids can relate with, anger, pain, frustration.
I mean, he's older, and yet he's right in the crest of what's going on today.
Because, look, I hope I do an all right job at maybe giving a guess, but because, like I said, he's not going up there and talking about kids are dumb, I'm old, my hair's coming out of my ears, but not on my head. Comedians that basically get to a point where all they talk about is, everything's bad now. Kids are, I know. And the problem with kids are they're too soft. And the problem with this, well, they don't want to hear it. Even if I underline even and circle it. And I've said this a million times because I think it's necessary to say it a million times. That's how the other side or the other people get you to know what they're saying. So even if you're right, they don't want to fucking hear it. And I don't blame them. Would you want to go on stage and hear a guy who's 40 or 50 talking about how he was born at a better time and music sucks now, kids are soft now? He doesn't do that. And what he complains about, I think, well, kids, whether they're even 14 or 15 or 16 or 23, they relate with him. And what I mean by that is you'd be surprised how young people are that listen to podcasts.
Yeah.
Obviously, kids that are that age aren't going out to comedy clubs. But what I'm saying is, he talks about things that they can relate with. And that's why, your age, really doesn't matter to a certain point. Like as long as you are talking about things they can relate with, So I think that's how Eddie does it. And I don't think he did it I don't think he did it, what do you call it, like calculated. It's just him talking about what he wants to talk about. And he, all ages love him.
Yeah. How did you meet Eddie Pepitone and Andy Kindler?
Eddie was doing like a sketch, pre-recorded sketch that they rolled in. And I remember just thinking, holy shit, this guy's so funny. And I asked people, like, who is this guy? And he's more of a New York comedian then. And I just fell in love with Eddie. And Andy Kindler, I was working in Dallas. Oh, that's probably about 27. And the club manager was like, you got to meet Andy Kindler. You got to meet Andy Kindler. There were two clubs in Dallas. They were only like 10 minutes apart. So after our show was over, we drove over to the other improv in Addison, and I hung out with Andy. And we ended up going back to the hotel, me, him, and a few other people from the club, like four of us. And we hung out till like 4 a.m. Just fell in love with Andy Kindler and still adore Andy Kindler. And just, that
guy who said you've got to meet Andy Kindler probably sensed that there was something very similar about your comedic approach.
He did. And in hindsight, I know his face and I remember him very well, but I'm forgetting his name, but he was the manager of the club. And yeah, pretty observant of him to know that I wouldn't, not that I would like Andy, but I would love Andy Kindler. And that night I remember laughing, like just met him, and then 2 hours later, literally punching the wall, like begging him to stop. Yeah. Begging him to stop. Please stop.
And he probably never stops, right?
Andy, you know what? That's why when they say it's a very fine line when people go, oh, they're annoying because they're always on. Well, I think what's really annoying is when someone's always on and not funny.
Right.
But even someone like Andy, who is always funny, has the qualities that I like in a person. He also can very easily turn it off and have a conversation from the heart. I think he does it perfectly. Like I said, I adore Andy Kindler. And I also like people that get angry about things that I think, look, we all should do whatever we want. But I like when people get angry about things that I perceive are worth getting angry about, not angry at the victims. You know, whenever I see a comedian getting angry at the victims or the people that need a hug, whenever I see a comedian making fun of the people that are already getting made fun of and literally beaten up in the streets, they're already getting beaten up in the streets, and then you take some verbal blows at them. Now, granted, you're not physically hurting them, but you just decide, I'm going to take verbal blows at them. Like, no, they're already getting picked off. It's fluffy in the way that they do it. It's not like, fuck that group, they suck. They think it's harmless. So I think those comedians that I always tend to love that do talk about things socially or politically or whatever, it's always more entertaining for me when I feel or perceive that they're barking at the people that I feel need to be barked at.
Your episode this week of your podcast is a remix. Did somebody send that in?
Yes. You didn't listen to the opening.
No, I listened to the first half of it. I was busy rereading your book for the second time. But
in the opening, yes. Danny Robbins is a listener, and he sent me...
Just sent it in.
He sent me 4 months ago, like a 4-minute thing he did. It was just like a one episode he took, and he took 4 minutes and added music and basically scored it 4 minutes. And then about 5 months ago when I heard that, said, hey, would it be too much of a taking for you to do a best of episode?
Yeah.
And he did it. And I was so, when I say I don't take that for granted, maybe that means you appreciate it. You always appreciate it. But then you take a step back and really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Someone took the time
Sure.
to take your words and everybody on the show's words and bits and stuff.
And editing is a grueling process.
Yes, and he did a beautiful job. He did a beautiful job, and I really take that to heart, and I really cherish that and appreciate it.
On Monday, you're doing a issues podcast. So this, bringing up the mixing of comedy and issues, what kind of issues are we? Is it politics and the things that we were talking about?
Yes, Monday. Although I did ask if I should drop it a different day, and I think the consensus is I'm going to start dropping those shows on Sunday instead of Monday. But nevertheless, what you were saying, for me, it's mostly social issues.
Ah.
But social issues are political issues too. It all mushes together. But I've said this and I say it before. Whatever, we're all doing the same thing. I hope we're all trying to say what we think is right, and then history will tell who's right and wrong. Now, I always say, there's an old expression: if you argue, I don't like to use the word idiot, but it's the way the expression. You'll get what it means. If you argue with maybe a non-logical person is a nicer way to say it or whatever. But if you argue with an idiot from afar, no one knows who the idiot is. And I think the first thing you should do before you discuss something with somebody is go, do you think that history tells the truth? And if they say no or don't know what you mean, first, if they don't know what you mean, you explain yourself. But if they go, no, I don't think, in other words, if you go back into the 50s and the 60s and you see all the issues, can we now go, oh my God, of course we should have interracial schools. And so history usually writes everybody, it'll tell the truth. But in the moment, we all just do it from our heart. So when I talk about social issues, or any comedian talks about social issues, I really feel strongly about this. You're getting, and me too, I'm including myself, you're getting to talk about things that you don't have a degree on. If I talk about hitting kids, or, I'm anti-spanking, or if you talk about issues that you haven't studied. You're just using your comedy platform to be able to talk about things you really have no degree to talk about. So, for the love of God, you hope you're right when history writes itself. And by the way, some people might not even think about that, and you should. How's what you're saying going to stand the test of time? Because you can debate it now And I think this and you think that. Oh, they're wrong. And you can go back and forth. Me too, with my little, hey, I think this and you think that. But history, it's a little cleaner than that. History's cleaner than that. You listen to something 40 years later and you go, oh, one person seems egregious, because even the slower to evolve, 40 years later do evolve. 45 years later, 50 years later, when you hear someone trying to explain how black people that can't use white water fountains is not prejudiced. There's just different classes of people. Oh, now it's like, it's like there's no, it just tells the truth. So I try to think about that.
Isn't it like in the late 60s when pop music got kind of hijacked by the counterculture and issues in a sense? I mean, this is now, because when we look at the shows that are on TV, Real Time with Bill Maher and Jon Stewart and Colbert, I mean, politics it definitely infected deep into comedy. And it kind of reminds me of pop music in the late 60s.
I think there's probably some crossover. I think it's a good thing. And of course, by the way, the other thing is there's always comedians through every era that don't choose to do that. And I am not one of those. First of all, I don't think anybody I know thinks this. It's just a choice. But there's comedians that don't talk about social issues or politics that are brilliant comedians. Some of my favorite comedians. So I think that's important too. And I think that's always happened. If you go to any era where maybe like you're saying, where they were taking on those issues, there were also people that weren't and brilliant at it and great at it and necessary. And I'm glad they were doing what they did. So I like everything. But yeah, I think you see comedians, sometimes I say around the house, thank God they're doing it, because again, history will write itself. Now someone could go, well, you're saying that the comedians are on the right side of history. When I say comedians, like whether it's Samantha Bee or John Oliver or Jon Stewart, I really think I'd put money on it that 30 years from now, and you go back and listen to their work, you're going to go, no, they were as right as you can be. Inevitably, everything's an opinion, I guess. But yeah, I think history will go, wow, they were dead on. Because, comedians get paid to tell the truth. We figured out a way we can say whatever we want and get paid. So really, even if I disagree.
It's the perfect platform, really.
Yes, even if I disagree, I want to make that really clear. Even if I disagree with what a comedian's saying, like he's gone after, a comedian that's making fun of transgender people, he's doing what he thinks, though. He is doing what he thinks. So that's sort of almost the opposite of a politician in some examples. So I think that comedians are truth tellers, and I think, thank God they're doing it. When I watch television, I go, thank God those people are there calling absurdity on what it is and doing it brilliantly through comedy and editing. And so
the news media hasn't been living up to its responsibility to do just that.
I mean, some do better than others, and some have gotten better. I'm like, okay, well, I'm proud of that person, but yes, not like certain comedians just clobbered over the head, So maybe it's happening by, necessity. Maybe it's needed right now. So
the filming of Crashing, those episodes that you're doing, is that season 2? That will be coming out, or is that actually season 3 that they're filming?
I'm not sure. I think it's season 2. That was I'm not a big fan of acting. I just, I'm not, the process of it is hard for me sometimes, but that was a really easy, they was really just like, basically like, get the gist of it down, do it in your own words. And, it was a pretty cool set to be on.
Well, that's probably what happens when you work for comedians who've been given kind of a green light to avoid all the interference that normally sitcoms and shows get, like Baskets and Horace and Pete by CK seems to be. It just feels like a similar kind of. You can just kind of sense that a lot of it isn't as scripted as you'd think, that the comedians are allowed to actually improv some of their own lines, and that the whole production itself is being directed by the comedian who's fronting the show.
Right.
Yeah.
That was the shortest answer I've ever given.
Well, those are great shows. Have you seen The Baskets?
I have. I haven't seen that many of them.
And
holy shit! And
Louis Anderson. I mean, come on.
Oh my God! I could watch that. I love that Zach, has that vehicle now. But and Louis, God damn it, is he great?
Yeah. And it's some serious stuff. I mean, in the Horace and Pete, it's not actually in Baskets as well. The comedy is laced in with, I guess, social issues, really.
Yeah.
It's a 50-50 mix in those shows.
Yeah, there's some great stuff going on right now. Not only, talk about a great era, yes, there might be bad shows on television too, but they're easy not to watch. I don't know anything easier than not partaking in a show. Mm-hmm. But not only is there current brilliant television, when people talk about back then and there's, whatever, comedy or this or music, not only do you have the great shows of today, and there's so many of them, you have the great shows of the past that people get to see. What more? That's why when people complain, it fucking perplexes me. Because it's not only do you have the current good stuff, but you can go to TV Land or any reruns and see not only the great shows of the past, whether it's the 50s, 60s, or 70s, you can see the shitty shows from the past if you want to, which is sometimes interesting and telling.
Well, I wonder if some of these new shows will change sitcoms moving forward. We can avoid some of the, horrendous sitcoms that we've had to sit through in the past. But as you say, it's easy enough to not watch them.
Yeah, I think they'll always be around if there's an audience for them, So, but there's certainly, there's so much variety.
Andrew Dice Clay has a series on, I don't know if it's on Netflix, but it seems like a season. And it was interesting seeing him come back.
What is his show about?
It's sort of about him. And it's set him, years later, he's married, and I think he's got a couple sons, and he's, some of the plot works on his relationship with the local casinos, doing sets there and still gambling. And so it's kind of just a look at him in the future. It acknowledges, that he was a big star with a big entourage filling stadiums, and now he's, shrunk down a little bit. But he's still himself, and you can kind of see the compromises he's had to make. And it's shown in his relationship with his wife, which is quite comedic. You can see he's had to tone it down to get her to put up with him. It's funny.
I didn't know that. I always root for someone, especially I don't know Andrew too well, Andrew Dice Clay, but whenever I've seen him or bumped into him over the years, he's always been a nice guy. So if somebody comes back, I always try to root for them. Sometimes I hope they can reinvent themselves. And I like liking it. I like watching someone that's reinventing themselves, if you want to call that, and going, hey, have you seen that? That's really good.
Well, it was essentially a character he invented and just ran with it as far as it would go. Yeah. And I think it played a very important part in comedy history, breaking the rules and shocking the hell out of us. There was an interesting quote on the Norm Macdonald interview with you that I can't help but say. And Norm Macdonald says, if he went and saw Andrew Dice Clay, he'd destroy and leave you hitting the wall. But he'd also leave you feeling a little queasy. You, Todd Glass, kill, but you leave something nice on stage. It's one thing to make people laugh. It's another thing to make people smile. And so there's something very positive in your comedy that I think is different.
I appreciate that. And, it's like I think I said about Eddie Pepitone. I wouldn't consider Eddie angry because he's, in other words, yes, he might be raising his voice and he might have a gruffness about him, but I think he's doing it about the right thing. At least I perceive.
Right.
So I hope me too. I don't want to become a parody of myself. And I see that happening sometimes where a comedian or people, I always say comedian, or people in general, definitely. You complain, but you go, How much love are you bringing into the world? You talk about, this today and no one does this anymore. I think my new favorite thing to say is, you know what no one does anymore when people say that? And I'm not talking about, there's nothing wrong with reminiscing. I'm not barking at reminiscing, but when it spills over that, you know what no one does anymore? No one plays outside. Good, go play outside. Good, do you play outside? It's like, no, you don't do it anymore, so you think no one does it. Even if people do a little less than they used to, I still don't give a shit. Because then the next stage is talking about the youth today, like we talked about. So like whenever anybody goes, you know, what no one does anymore, no one talks there, you know, I don't want to become the person who just complains, but isn't really, are you a positive person or do you just complain? Like when you
I hear what you're saying. I wonder, because, you know, I can't help myself but point out all these millennials who are walking around staring at their phones all the time and wonder, you know, how are we going to wind up 30 years from now with nuclear power plants and a generation of people who are addicted, right? And that's kind of negative and bitter of me, and I sound like every, you know, old person who's ever lived through the centuries.
And stop right there. Do something about it, as opposed to your next sentence telling me why you're going to continue it. Because you know what I mean? I smell that. And I'm being a little bit aggressive with you here. But it's like, I know I could do
what are my choices? I can't beat them, so I have to join them. I don't see any middle ground.
I'll tell you what you can do.
Yeah.
Why don't you? First of all, I always say, look, I talk about the same thing over and over again. And as long as I preface it, sometimes I go, should I shut up about this? Now, I go, well, I talk about it because it gets brought up. So like on this interview here, like it gets brought up a lot. I didn't bring it up. You did. But I do love talking about it. And I try to think, what's the cleanest angle I can hit this at? And look, there is some to social discussions, and I guess that's what this is. It's not a political discussion. We're having a social discussion. There is some math to social discussions. There is some math to it. And the math of kids are young adults, let's say. Look, I'm not going to change anyone's opinion unless I get into their head and say, I see why you think that. Now, I'm not going to do it now because then I'll forget my main point. I've learned to not go off too much on a side tangent, but we will later if you remember. But you have to say, no, I see why you think that. I absolutely do. Otherwise, they're going to think you don't even agree with it. No, I absolutely see everything that people say about millennials. I see why they say it. But guess what? The social math is, and here's where I turn a little bit of a dick. And I can say this now. I'm not 20. Kids, young adults, get smarter. End of story. That's the math. That's the social math. You can't go, you know, and it's funny, everyone's okay with that in the past. Like if you go, well, kids, when I say smarter, I mean, maybe they become socially more aware or we invent new things. So if kids are getting dumber and dumber, my friend likes to say this, oh, so no more inventions? And the person goes, well, no. Oh, no more groups we're going to fight for? Well, there's a reason. And they're not getting dumber and dumber. They get smarter and smarter. And older people that get confused, say those things. And, you know, and then the more you say that shit, the more you don't know who kids are. Because the way we become, you know, maybe not understanding a group of people, like all Jews do this or all women do that. You say that because you don't have a lot of Jewish people in your life. You say that because you don't have a lot of women in your life. And the more you keep saying it, the less of that group you have in your life. So people that say the kids and the problem with the kids and the kids and the kids and the kids, oh yeah, and if you tell them they're smart, they'll take a breath and go, no, I know some of them. I'm not talking about all of them. I'm just saying the masses. Well, the more you think the masses of kids are stupid and the more you vocalize that, they don't fucking want to be around you. And then, like we talked about before, the next thing you know, you have a distorted view of what kids are like. Kids don't play outside anymore. Yes, they do. Well, kids, they're good on their phones, but they don't talk to each other. Yes, they do. So keep saying kids, and it's not going to make your life any better. It's to me, treat it like an intervention. Treat it like an intervention. If you want your life to be better, you know, maybe drugs will do a little more damage to you where people see it, but treat it like drugs. Get an intervention, get a grip on it, learn about it, study it, and look at the facts. All social issues it's not all math, but if there's even 20% math to a social issue, go to that math. Look at the history of the world. Every generation thinks the kids are getting dumber and dumber. And you know the sad part? When history rolls around, they're not. They're not getting dumber and dumber. Every generation thinks it. And this is the last thing I'll say. It is, if I'm going to throw around this word, it's narcissistic to me to think when it hits you, now that you're 40 or 50, and now, oh, this is the generation of kids that are not smarter because it got your feathers ruffled. It's too hard for you to go, holy shit. So instead of going, oh my God, I'm turning into my parents, because you don't want to do that either, because you knew you weren't going to do that. So instead of saying fuck and having the decency to say, oh my God, I fucking turned old. Instead, you're going to do a narcissistic move and go, oh no, this is the year where adults were getting smarter and smarter and kids were getting dumber and dumber. Come on. Cut the shit.
That's funny.
Let me say something a little bit more on that. When I say get help, I don't mean it. Yes, maybe it's not it's a little bit of aggressive way, and it's not going to change someone. So maybe I should take the tone out of my voice. But as you get older and you fight youth, people get hurt because of that. There's people behind these issues. And kids have an amazing Yelp record. I've talked about this in my special. You know, kids, if you go back into history and look what they fought for, look at groups they fought for, look at words they tried to get out of our lexicon, whatever they fought for, the masses of kids, they tend to be right. So go, maybe they're right now. And get help because when you fight youth, it's like if you don't want to fight a fire, that's one thing. But to go grab the hose from the fire people and not let them fight it, like they're fighting it. If you don't want to help this world march forward, don't be like an old, crotchety, dying old fuck and fight against them. Sit on the side. We'll bring you lemonade. Don't do a thing to help progression, but don't fight it. It's not cute. It's not cute. When every time someone says the problem with kids today, I think they think, well, I'm just talking. No, it's not cute. And it does make me very angry to hear in my voice.
I know a couple people who are our age who are just like that. You'll be talking to them and all of a sudden they pull out their phone and they start texting, or, you know.
Everybody does it.
Yeah.
So get a grip on it. I am not implying, or I won't take anybody with me, that sometimes we all need to go, hey, get off your phone, be in the present. But you know what? My friend pointed out, first of all, I will bring nobody with me if I don't agree. Yes, we all can have better cell phone etiquette. We all can have it. But you know what? Sometimes when you look at a kid on his phone, he's reading a book.
Yeah.
He's doing research on how to, and I don't think I'm just saying this.
We could be listening to a really good podcast too.
Yes. Yeah. So let's say out of 100% of the time you see someone on the phone, I'm not negating that there would be a percentage of, no, you get off your phone, talk to the person at the register, get off your phone, talk to your brother, get off. Yes, but I bet 80% of it, if you went up to 100 kids or anybody that you saw on your phone, they might be doing research to edit. Yeah. Like if you could see 100 kids lined up and you could snap your fingers and let the phone turn into the vehicle that, you know, that would have been 40 years ago, which would have been a book or a radio, or doing research on a group of people, or reaching out maybe because they're dealing with something. And now I bet a huge percentage of it is that. Even at concerts, you know, they get such a rap that maybe, and I don't want to do this either, sometimes I defend them even in a little dickish way. Like I know that maybe I overly defend them, but like people go, when you go to concerts, now I get it. With a comedian or a singer, if you're trying something new and they're pulling out the phones, I get that. But put it in the perspective. And I went to a concert and I had my phone out 10% of the show. But the other 90, I was watching it. It's just you have 10,000 people, so there's always some people with their phones out. So even that, I'm like, you know, even if I agree, I still don't give a shit. It's like I don't want to hear anything about kids today. But that tone.
I had a old person moment walking into the Apple store, which I had no clue how it operated. So the 70s person in me is obviously looking for the cashier, where you're going to get information. And so it was like, you know, I just felt like I was led around a romper room. And the first person who came and talked to me was a good-looking younger lady who on her laptop. And to me, it was as if as soon as she started talking to me, she started typing. Little did I know that she was inputting all my data in ways that I couldn't even comprehend. Anyway, it was an interesting process of sort of righteous indignation that resulted by the end of it in me getting everything I wanted in lightning speed no cashier, handed from section to section. And I mean, that's kind of a lesson in confronting the sort of new times we live in, the newer, younger way of doing business. And then in the end, seeing how much quicker and more efficient it all worked out. It just made me feel.
By the way, and also, whatever people say they miss, let's say when I said people go, people used to play outside. You can still play outside. And you don't think that the Pokemon thing brought modern day technology and exercising and bringing people outside? I know young people. They still play outside. And like I said, even if it's not as much as it used to be, which I think it might be, but even if it's not, I don't want to lose anybody. Even if it's not, they still do. And like, I was at my friend was telling me a story about, he was at I think it was like a place. He didn't have cash. What was the story? He didn't have cash, this guy in line. And he had been, look, I have it basically right. I always get confused, but my friend told me the story. Somebody in line didn't have money, or they needed money. So they Venmoed the other person money, and then that person used their card. Something like that. I know I have it a little fuzzy. But I have enough of the story to go. That's modern day technology mixed with good old fashioned help your neighbor. So you got to put things into perspective. And I have a new favorite phrase that if you look at things through a tight scope, I get how people think things. I really do. And I think it's important, which I forget about a lot because I'm so in a rush to say what I want to say, to spend some time letting them know why you think that. And if you do a great job at it, even such a good job where they think you're agreeing, well, they'll know that you know what's in their head. And I'll give you a quick example of like what I call tight scope, wide scope. And I think that's a lot of our problems, a lot of them, that we do a lot of stuff through tight scope. And if medically your doctor always gave you the tight scope answer, they'd misdiagnose you a lot. You got to widen the scope. And my joke that I have in my act is, I see why someone would say, oh, all these terms we have today, like, depression and this and peanut allergies, I could genuinely see through a tight scope why someone thinks there weren't peanut allergies 50 years ago. And they'd be right to think it. They'd be wrong, but they'd be absolutely right to think it because that's a good point through a tight scope. It's fucking true. There were not peanut allergies 50 years ago. And you could see other people going, ain't that fucking funny? Oh, so did you, all of a sudden, now we got peanut allergies. Okay, widen the scope. Unexpected deaths is what they were called.
Huh.
Unexplained death. So you're like, oh, but you could see someone thinking, God, that's a great point. There weren't peanut allergies. We just made that up. So you can't deal with social issues through a tight scope because you'll get the wrong answer. You have to widen the scope for everything. You fucking hear me?
Yep. Yeah. What's with your book? Your book's been out for a while.
I don't talk about my book. I'm not an open book. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Your book, The Situation. So it's been out for a while.
It has been. It was 4 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
Or 3.
Has it changed your comedy or how the crowds react to you? I expect that it would be a positive change.
I think it maybe. Go ahead.
No.
I think maybe it lets people know a little bit more about you and maybe brings some different people out. But I think it made my comedy better, I hope. It certainly made me talk about things I didn't used to talk about on stage.
Yeah.
So I think it helps. I think the more honest you are, obviously, in comedy or music, probably always a good thing. I don't think anyone would defy that. So I think the book helped.
You know what the book really taught me? So this is, I guess, why you should be writing books. When I met you, I saw in your act, I met you, you chit-chatted. I wanted to say to you something that, after reading your book, would have been a huge mistake, was that, no one cares. And that's because I'm from Toronto, a cosmopolitan center, very liberal-minded, generally, population here. And, I mean, amongst the people I know and in my life, like, it just is the last thing that I'm thinking about, we want to absorb all your comedy. And then in your book, you point out, I mean, the whole book is about this torturous thing you went through. And even one of your chapters talks about how you were mad at somebody for saying just that.
So what you're saying is nobody cares. You wanted to say nobody cares about what?
About you coming out. It's just so
right, you mean that
irrelevant.
Right.
And yet your whole book talks about this torturous process that you and millions of people are going through. And it's so dismissive of somebody like me to say, we just don't care. Like, give us more jokes. I mean, we just want, your product. We don't care about if you're different and yet what that does is it diminishes all the work and struggle that you put into trying to overcome it.
Well, but that's often talked about, and I like to be very clear with my thoughts. I try. There are people that they're not egregiously hateful people at all. Matter of fact, brilliant and open-minded, but that doesn't mean they can't be better in connection with the world and people's plight. You don't have to go to couples counseling. I look at understanding people like couples counseling. You're just learning about other people. Some cases it's your significant other and you're in therapy. Some cases it's transgender people. Some cases it's women's issues. You don't have to be like, fuck women, they should cook and clean. Fuck it, we should go back to the way it used to be. No, that's egregious talk you're not going to hear, pretty much. So you don't have to be that to still learn more. Not everybody that goes to couples counseling is waiting until they're in the most deplorable situation they can be. Now, that does happen, where there's yelling and hopefully not physical violence, but maybe slamming doors or even physical violence, and they end up in counseling. But some people just go because we're not doing horrendous, but we could do better. And that's, to me, how I try to look at life. Like, the more you're in connection with other people and you understand their plight. And I'll tell you this, for everybody that thinks, they use the race card unnecessarily, or they use that's homophobic unnecessarily. Do people use those cards unnecessarily? Of course they do. But you know what? Overwhelmingly not. Overwhelmingly, they don't use the card when they should more because they're afraid everyone's going to say that. So we all, I think my mom said this once, you hang out with people, hopefully, that you circle yourself with, and they usually mirror you. Not that you have to agree with all your friends on everything, but, it's hard to have a friend that's racist if you're, so most of your friends, but that shouldn't put you out of touch with the real world. So when people say that, and they say what you say in a loving way, I get it. Like, you don't mean you don't care. You mean, I don't care that you're gay, or I don't care. Yes, but you're not the world.
Well, it's like saying to somebody who struggled as a visible minority, I don't care if you're a visible minority. And to discount it, and anytime the person has anything to say or express about it, it's irrelevant because, and so that person's sort of pretty well informed, but he's also insensitive at the same time. Because,
I know it's like a no shit type of a thing, but like what you just said, that really bothered me because I heard people that would say it. They go, now why do you have to come out? I don't, and these are people that really don't care. So you still, just because you're not, let's say, I don't like using words like sexism or homophobic because I think they fall on deaf ears. I think there's a cleaner way to say it. To go a little long, I hope I'm not going too long. But if you say the word sexism to somebody, sexism, if I'm doing an okay job of explaining it, encompasses maybe, let's say, 30 behaviors. 30 behaviors. So if you just say that guy's being sexist, or that someone's being sexist, sexist meaning it encompasses 30 behaviors. I learned through something that Jimmy Pardo said, not knowing how much I would quote it. He didn't say someone was sexist, because it would have just fallen deaf ears. Because what behavior is he talking about? If someone says, they're homophobic, well, that encompasses 30 behaviors maybe. What behavior? Call the behavior. Try to list the behavior. And what Jimmy Pardo did, it was so much cleaner. He's talking about somebody, I won't mention who, and he goes, well, they certainly have an old-fashioned view of the relationship between a man and a woman.
Huh.
Isn't that better? It's like, oh, even if you disagree with what he's saying, which I didn't, you could go, oh, it's instead of saying they were sexist, they have an old-fashioned view of this. So you can be homophobic and not give a shit if your son was gay, maybe, or your friend is gay, because a lot of people do that. They go, I'm not homophobic. My neighbor's gay. He takes trips with us every year. He's the vice president of my company. I'm like, how can I be racist? The vice president of my company is black. I just made him the vice president. So how? Because it encompasses 30 behaviors, and so that you're not egregious. You're not, if a Bunsen burner, you're not bubbling over. But it doesn't mean you can't still learn more.
How do you write your comedy?
None of your goddamn business.
How do you decide what to put in, what not to put in? Are you one of these people who are always carrying a notepad around?
My phone has, oh my God, it's made me a better comedian. It's certainly made life easier. So I have my phone and I just record things. And my style, everybody has a different style. Mine is pretty much, I'll say something into my phone. I'll listen to it later. And then I'll try it out on stage. You know, it obviously doesn't start out as a 10-minute bit, but starts out as a 40-second bit.
Work off sort of talking points when you're doing your sets?
Yeah, no, I eventually will now. First, I'll just say it into my phone, you know, real quick, because I don't want to lose it. It's late at night and you have a thought. And then I will just speak it into my phone later. And I still print those pages out, but I will just add a joke to, I think I have one folder that's new jokes, and then I'll try it. If it works, then I'll throw it into my master file, but I can do it all verbally on the phone. So it changed my life, you know. And also just being able to record it into the phone. You know how many ideas like Mitch Hedberg's old joke, you think of a funny idea in bed, and then you have to talk yourself out of why it's a funny idea to prevent getting up and getting a pen or something. Now you just reach over, get your phone and say it. Great.
Yeah, people like me have to figure out how to take our punchlines out of our premises.
Yeah, you don't want the audience getting to the punchline before you.
Yeah, well, you're supposed to say the funny thing last. And
right.
Is this something you're born with, or is it a science?
You know, like we can list my favorite comedians. They're funny in their bones. But I think you can learn to be funny, but not in your bones. I think that you're born with. And then you learn how to get it across, of course. Just because you're funny in your bones doesn't mean you kill on stage the first time you get on stage. It means you got a good start.
Another thing you said in your book was, we all know people who are funny and people who are maybe, 10 times funnier than a comedian. But taking it to the stage is the thing.
That's part of it. But, I'm a great painter, but I just can't figure out how to pick up a brush.
Right.
Yeah, it's part of it. That's why I always motivate people that I think are funny. I go, maybe you're not meant to do it.
Yeah.
Because, it's like sex. You're not going to have sex with somebody or if you like sex. I like sex. Oh, you like it? You like it? Yeah, it's good. Sex is good. You like it? You're never going to have sex with somebody, ever, because it's so uncomfortable. You have to get undressed. If you break it down, it's the most embarrassing, vulnerable thing in the world. So if you like sex, you probably ain't going to have it. And that's what I mean. But if you fucking obsessed with, physical contact and meeting that person, and then just can't, and the drive and the stomach ache and the good feeling of like, you'll probably have it. So same thing with comedy. If you like comedy, you're probably never going to do it. But if you go fuck and you're obsessed with it, that's what it takes to get over the fear, because it is scary, just like sex is. They're both scary. So, and sometimes if I think someone's funny and I want to help them a little bit, I go, maybe you don't like it as much as you think you do. And then that gets them fired up if they're meant to do it.
My curiosity about comedy, how you write it, how it's structured, how logical it is just because that's the kind of guy I am. Anytime I see a black art, I kind of just have to understand it. I have no intention of pursuing it. But it's such a mysterious mix of skills. It just becomes a mystery. The closer you look, the more mysterious it is.
So I like to watch new comedy, but you can learn. I watch some new comedians. I go, wow, you can do that? I don't know. There's a lot. When you go to mention names, you feel like you can't mention. I watch people like, Liza Skinner and go, oh, I can do that. I never think that. Or Rory Scovel or Whittemore Thomas or, people like that. There's so many more. But, of course, whenever you're doing an interview, you forget. But the point is, that is why I like to be around newer comedians, because it inspires you. Hopefully you inspire them, of course. That feels good.
Can it uninspire you? Because, okay, if you see somebody, killing in a way, maybe you think, oh my God, I can't be that funny. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just like you're on your podcast, you pull guys over the cop thing. And it's like, why didn't anyone else think of that? Now we can't do it because you've done it. All we're left with is, two quirky garbage men on the back of a garbage truck with, with some sounds you can throw in there. I hope you do it. But there's no point even doing it because, you're just going to jump in there and do it first before anybody and steal it. What's the last thing we could possibly do? Airline pilots with maybe some noises and, and that's it. So
that's such a funny, that's hilarious because I've been on both sides of that. That makes me feel good. You're saying that on this version, I was doing something. Look, this just comes down to the fine line of being influenced and stealing. You'll go to what makes you tick in that area, not. And by the way, sometimes when you're younger, you cross that line of maybe, you're influenced, but are you stealing? But yeah, hopefully as you keep doing comedy, I see a lot of comedians that are maybe not a little more than influenced, but they might be taking affectations of another comedian. But you know what? I see a lot of those comedians grow out of it too. So I'm not always so quick in the beginning of the people's careers, including me. So yeah, I think you just take it and go, wow, I could do that. Like I remember once I was telling my friend, I go, you should talk about that. And he goes, I'm just complaining. I go, yes, if you figure out how to complain on stage, writing material is a lot easier. And I also say, first of all, anybody should do whatever they want. I just throw this out there. Remember to talk about what makes you happy, too. Don't become a parody of yourself. Talk about what you hate, but if you want, at least if you don't want, that's fine. But I try to go, what makes you happy? Anything make you happy? Well, how could that be funny? Oh, of course it could be.
What clubs in LA do you work on a weekly basis to keep your toe in the pool?
Well, I do hang out at the Improv. It's just sort of, my base. But as far as shows, there's so many cool shows. Like in LA, like there's outdoor shows. There's there's the living room show that doesn't exist anymore. The Meltdown. The living room show does exist, just in a different form. And Brouhaha, and so many cool shows. So I just try to, you usually get emails of people. Hey, you want to be a part of this show? And you ask a few people, hey, have you done that show? So I'll do like a ton of, just weird, eclectic shows. I was doing the Brouhaha one night, and I remember looking up on the roof. The people packed in the backyard. Christmas lights on the, they created a ceiling of Christmas lights, sort of gave it an intimacy, 50 chairs in the yard. I look up on the roof, and there's like 10 kids sitting up on the roof watching the show. I was like, wow, this is so cool. And then that inspires me to want to do more of those shows, where these audiences are great and they're, like I say, nurturing. And so I just really do, all over the place in LA. Just wherever I hear something cool is going on, I try to go check it out.
To perform or to watch?
I'll perform.
Yeah.
I'll go sometimes. Like first time I went to Brouhaha, I just went to watch because everyone was like, "Well, Todd, you're gonna love it," and I just went to watch. But usually perform.
If you don't do 3 sets a week, did something happen to you?
No, I'm not. That is different for me. I'm not. I can go a week without doing shows. I mean, I'm doing my podcast. I can go a week without doing shows. Not much more than that. I don't want to, but I can. And sometimes I'll even go by a comedy club, not planning on going on, but then end up doing a set. So I'm usually doing at least 1 set a week. Now, when I'm on the road, obviously that's different. On the road you do typically Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But when I'm home in LA, it's a little different. But
we have that Montreal Comedy Festival.
Yeah.
Do you go to that every year?
I do. I don't go every year, but I go. So many great comedians that go, and you get to see like just hanging out every night. One year I went. I ended up doing shows, but that was not my goal. I went to just go. I'm gonna go. I'm just gonna go and watch shows and hang out with comedians every night. So. But yeah, that's always a lot of fun. There's a lot of really great festivals now with really great comedy.
Park Boys. What should we be listening to and watching that you recommend?
It's so funny. You think of all this, I tell you how great everything is. What do I watch? It's such a good question because I don't really have a good answer.
Yeah, but you're the expert, right? You should be telling us what to keep an eye out for.
Better with comedians. Like Bob's Burger, I probably wouldn't have watched unless the Chris Burden, our original sound person, made me watch it. Not made me watch it, but made it easy. He goes, "Coming after the show tonight, we'll go watch Bob's Burger," and then I fell in love with it. It took an episode or two to understand. I loved that it was positive, and you know what I mean. Like it didn't have to be like a mean family to each other, but I fell in love with Bob's Burger. There must be other shows I like. But right now I'm drawing a blank.
Well, that Eugene Bergman, I think is his name. He's got a podcast now. Everybody's got a podcast.
Yeah, you know what? Matter of fact, I talked about that on my show last week. I listened to an episode or two of that and really liked it. They're short episodes.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of there's so much stuff. I'm really trying to think what shows I went with. Well, you know what it is? In the last year, we've been on a kick after our podcast. We all gather in my house, and everybody gets a turn to show you a YouTube clip.
Ah.
And we've been going way back, like watching a lot of music, like old stuff that I never even watched. It was before my time. Like last night we watched Dean Martin. We're like, oh my God, I understand Dean Martin now.
Huh.
I never understood it. I was like, yeah, it's Dean Martin. Well, even when I was young, he was already, but now you watch it and stuff like that. Now I know that's not what you asked me. We were talking about modern day stuff, but we've been on a kick lately of going back and watching older comedy. But
Jerry Lewis and his famous interview, which just must beg a bit.
What a crotchety old fuck.
Well, some people are suggesting that was a bit.
Nah. I put money on it. I put money on it.
It was horrible questions that he was being asked. He was basically asking, so now that all your friends are dying and there's no future for you to live for, what's it really feel like? I mean, if you actually listen to the questions, you can't blame him almost.
You know what's so funny is that he is a crotchety old fuck.
Right.
It took himself a little too seriously. But I thought the same thing. I go, maybe he was just tired of the questions. And I heard that they said it took way too long to set up lights.
Wow.
Like they were setting up, and by that time he was just in a grumpy mood. But if he had a great reputation outside of that, I don't think I would be judging him. But yeah, he sort of got a crotchety reputation.
Another shocking interview was Ricky Gervais interviewing Gary Shandling. One of the most uncomfortable things I've ever seen.
On whose part?
Well, it was a similar mix-up. I think they had scheduled 2 interviews at Gary Shandling's house, and they had confused. I think one was supposed to be serious and one was joking. And in the notes, it was supposed to be the serious one and then the joking one, and they had flipped them. And again, like you say, they were messing around in his house with lights and stuff like that. And so Gary was off a little bit, and then Ricky Gervais just being himself. I don't know, maybe he was doing a bit, but it got ugly and uncomfortable. It was difficult to watch. And it kind of turned me off Ricky Gervais a little bit, because you don't upset Gary Shandling.
Yeah, I'm a huge Gary Shandling fan. He's almost like,
Check it out on YouTube. It's there.
I will check it out.
Yeah.
By the way, some of the other shows we'd mentioned before were like baskets.
Yeah.
Shows like that I've, so there are some. I feel bad, like I'm sitting here going, I can't believe I couldn't think of any more. But nevertheless,
you said going back to old stuff is an important thing.
But we gotta sort of wrap it up, because I got another 5 minutes before I leave the gym.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot. Anything you want to mention, you just mentioned. We're gonna obviously to your website and your show dates. Any things you're going to be appearing in that we should be keeping an eye out for?
Look out. I have a new hour special that's going to find itself probably in about 3 or 4 months somewhere, wherever it ends up. My last one ended up on Netflix. Hope this one does too. Shot a pilot called Camping with Todd.
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward. I took Zach Galvanakis, John Doerr, and Eddie Pepitone camping for one night. That's a pretty simple concept. Sit around, make some dinner, sit around a crackling fire, and talk. And it was.
You don't like bugs?
Well, there weren't any bugs. We're in California.
Scorpions.
But it was great. It was, you're out of a studio. You got the fire. There's no phone. There's no internet. It's even though there were some cameras, but they were well hidden, and it just seemed like we were in the middle of the woods. And it led to a really great show. So we shot the pilot, and we're trying to find that a home right now. Other than that, just touring around doing stand-up and loving it.
That's great. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat.
Yeah, thank you, David. It made my hour and a half fly by on the phone.
Well, good.
On the treadmill.
How many pounds do you think you lost?
I don't know. I think I just worked off probably what I ate last night. I had a big bag of Skittles at 2 a.m. The biggest bag you could get.
I don't know what kind of message you're sending. On your website, there's a recipe for ice cream, cakey, sandwichy things that you then put back in the fridge. And
yeah, I know. I'm into the sweet. My other favorite thing is filling donuts with ice cream.
Another good idea.
Yeah.
Thank you, Todd Glass.
Thank you, David. Appreciate it. And I hope I'll see you next time I'm coming through Toronto.
Absolutely.
The Todd Glass Show is on the Nerdist Podcast Network. Find him also on iTunes. His new pilot, Camping with Todd, has Zach Galifianakis, John Doerr, Eddie Pepitone, and Todd go camping. He has a special on Netflix, another special, which may also find its way to Netflix. ToddGlass.com for dates. High Plains Comedy Festival, Denver, Colorado, August 24, 25, and 26. Helium Comedy Club in Portland, September 28, 29, and 30. Vermont Comedy Club, Burlington, Vermont, October 19, 20, and 21. Doc's Lab, San Francisco, October 27 and 28. And Helium towards the end of the year. ToddGlass.com.
Thank you for listening to TMI with your host Dave Archer and co-host Ian Stolberg.
I love how if you slow it down, it sounds like you didn't ruin it.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to TMI with your host Dave Archer and co-host Ian Stolberg from Ottawa. This episode has been brought to you by the Price Anderson Act. TMI can be heard on the web at Lisbon. We're on Google Play. We're also on SoundCloud. You can find us on Stitcher and rate and review us on iTunes. You can get a hold of us also at The Archer on Twitter, and TMI can also be reached via the email at archer@twxnet.com.
At that Archer. At that Archer.